Welcome back to Movie Recaper. Today I will show you an adventure, comedy, crime film from 1994, named Baby's Day Out. Spoilers ahead. Look out and fare thee well. Bennington Austin Cotwell IV, otherwise called Bink, is the child of Lorraine and Bennington Austin Cotwell III, a few socialites that live in a manor in a suburb of Chicago. The individual that invests the most energy with him and really realizes him well in any case, is his caretaker Gilbertini, an extremely mindful lady that will peruse him his beloved book, Child's Outing, or as Bink calls it, boo-boo again and again regardless of whether she's worn out on it. Today, Bink is getting his image taken so he can show up in the social pages of the paper, since Lorraine has been feeling they've kept their child stowed away from their companions. While the mother and babysitter prepare the child, the picture takers are all set too, however they experience an issue when the triplet of hoodlums trap them. Eddie, Vico and Norby grab genuine picture takers, tie them up and leave them in an old deserted distribution center prior to taking their outfits and their van with the goal that they can profess to be them. At the point when they show up at the house, their demonstration is accepted without any issues, so they accept out their gear as though they planned to snap the photo no doubt and ask the mother for quite a while alone with the youngster, since, in such a case that she's there, she might occupy him. Lorraine looks a piece suspicious, yet Eddie gets her to leave when he calls attention to her outfit isn't satisfactory for the photo. The workers leave with her to help her see as the right dress, however prior to doing as such, Gilbertini gives Eddie the book on the off chance that Bink gets troublesome. They change vehicles halfway however, leaving Theron camouflages with the photographic artist's regalia and gear behind in return for their own van. The police and the FBI before long show up at the house and start their examination, preventing Lorraine without a moment to spare from going out there and looking for the child all alone, which could be perilous. In the interim, the crooks are in their mysterious refuge, the last floor condo of a tall structure with an immense clock on the front. Bink glances through the book all alone and sees there are birds outside the window very much like the ones in the story, so he slithers out and utilizes the emergency exit to move to the rooftop after the birds. At the point when he observes a bay window, he glances through it and sees Eddie and Vico in the room, acquiring their consideration when he spits on them and chuckles. The hoodlums alarm and follow him, just to observe him slithering on a wooden board to arrive at the other rooftop where the bird has traveled to. Eddie comes nearer to get him and turns out to be hit by the board when the shift of Bink's weight makes it go all over, and considering it to be hazardous, Vico discards the board after Bink comes to the opposite side, dispensing with the opportunity for them to follow him through a similar way. The triplet concludes that the rooftops are sufficiently close enough to one another to hop. Norby and Vico figure out how to get over, however Eddie is as yet woozy and falls on a backstreet dumpster. In the meantime, Bink advances inside the structure, arriving at the condo and figuring out how to pass on it when the proprietor makes the way for the postal carrier. They're too bustling conversing with one another to see him creeping around their feet until he arrives at the lift, which he rides to the ground floor before at long last leaving the structure. Norby and Vico salvage Eddie out of the garbage bin with perfect timing to see Bink get on a packed blue transport since it matches the one in the book, so they rush to get into their van and chase after him town. The transport driver sees them and drives from them, losing them for 2 or 3 squares until the threesome figures out how to track down a way back into the central avenue, halting the van directly before the transport when it stops to let a major woman out, who conveys a pack where Bink has crept into. Norby converses with the driver and gets some information about the child, yet the driver simply takes off. While he calls the primary office to check whether there are any reports of a missing child, the triplet sees the enormous woman stroll behind their van and notice Bink serenely sitting in her pack. She takes him with her and leaves him with different children subsequent to changing his diaper, however Bink escapes again by moving into another child's buggy when the mother comes to get her. In the city, a journalist is as of now covering his abducting on the news, and he slithers past her when he sees a taxi, which likewise helps him to remember his book. He makes the columnist drop her receiver and the cameras are on him briefly, enough so that the lawbreakers might see him on a shop's TV. They rush after him yet they don't make it on schedule. Bink slithers into the taxi and views at them through the window as the vehicle drives away. Meanwhile, the Cotwells get a call from a man professing to have seen the child and go look at it. The man focuses at a loft in the wake of getting some cash out of them, yet it was obviously completely false. It's an arbitrary child having a place with a totally decent lady. At the point when the taxi parks to drop off its travelers, Bink creeps out and sees the zoo across the road, which likewise is in his book. The crooks show up then, at that point, having followed the taxi with their van, and see him go across the road with next to no issues. They attempt to do likewise, however it's more hard for 3 developed men to be overlooked by the vehicles, so a vehicle winds up rolling over their toes, making them flee in torment and fall into a trench. After they get out, they enter the zoo and follow Bink's tracks on the soil that take them to the primate house, where Bink is cheerily sitting inside an enclosure with a gorilla. This gorilla prefers the child and treats him as though he were its own, taking care of him products of the soil him safe. It isn't as great notwithstanding, when Vico puts his arm inside the enclosure to attempt to snatch Bink, the gorilla simply watches him for a couple of moments prior to coming nearer and crushing his hand with its clenched hand. Their next thought is to utilize a mop they view as neighboring. Norby sticks its handle inside the enclosure and puts it through Bink's garments to get him. However, the gorilla rapidly notification and takes Bink back prior to hitting Norby with the mop. A while later, they trust that the gorilla will nod off, and presently it's Eddie's chance to attempt to get the child out. Right away, it appears to be he's effectively bringing Bink closer, yet the gorilla awakens, snatches Eddie, and angrily throws him against one more enclosure subsequent to thundering all over. At that point, the zoo opens the rear of the gorilla's enclosure so it tends to be in the external region for some time, offering Bink the chance to securely get away. While the Cotwells observe Bink's image on the paper yet not in the manner they needed, Bink hangs out in the recreation area, observing the wide range of various children play and have a good time. He begins slithering endlessly again when the hoodlums show up in their van and begin following him, practically getting him before he goes through certain brambles and a passage 3 developed men can't stroll into. The threesome hurries to the opposite side park and hangs tight for him to emerge from the passage at the opposite end, snatching him just before the police show up. Playing the guiltless onlooker card, they sit on a close-by seat and conceal Bink between Eddie's legs, covering him with his coat. The police begin posing inquiries about their van and a missing child, and Eddie makes an honest effort to respond to them while wriggling in torment on the grounds that Bink is hitting his crotch and in any event, lighting it ablaze after he observes a lighter in one of Eddie's pockets. Norby and Vico remove the police with them to show them something about the van while Bink leaves the lighter on the seat and moves down from Eddie's lap, who can't prevent him from getting away on the grounds that he's going through horrendous aggravation. For the point when his 2 companions return, they lose him on the ground and set the fire by stepping over and again on his crotch. Back in the house, Lorraine approaches Gilbertini, understanding she's the one in particular that can see how she feels. While they bond over their adoration for the child, Bink is advancing toward a building site, followed intently by Vico. Bink sees a specialist's donut and needs it for himself, so he hops on a steel shaft to snatch it, not thinking often about the reality he's presently being lifted with the pillar to the most elevated floor of the structure. Eddie and Norby join Vico then, at that point, and together them 3 ride the lift until they arrive at an area the bar hasn't passed by yet. The thought is to hop on it and recover the child when the bar at long last arrives at their floor, yet the arrangement turns out poorly. When Vico hops on the bar, his weight makes it tip down and Bink to slide off until he arrives on the lift rooftop. As he creeps inside the structure, Eddie and Norby attempt to help Vico, who is going to lose his grasp on the bar. Norby attempts to get him to bring him back inside, yet he slips and winds up hanging misguided with him briefly before he loses his hold and falls on top of a few wooden loads up. This development is to the point of giving the steel shaft a push, and Vico figures out how to bounce once again into the structure, arrival on top of Eddie. Norby isn't really fortunate however, he sneaks off the wood just to arrive on another steel shaft prior to falling again and arriving inside a tank of wet concrete. Eddie and Vico attempt to chase after Bink while keeping away from the laborers, however Vico does just as Norby does, he attempts to hop back on the lift, yet he hits his head 2 or multiple times and in his discombobulation, he winds up tumbling off the structure and arriving in a dumpster. It's up to Eddie now. He comes staggeringly near Bink and is going to get him, yet he slips on some slobber the child has dropped, making him fall and hit his head with a mallet. At the point when he attempts to get up, he clutches a draping rope for help, however pulling it demonstrates an error when it turns over a tank that showers Eddie with stick. This dials back his strolling since he can scarcely make a stride without slipping, and it gives Bink sufficient opportunity to slither away and get onto a moving stage that brings him back down. Frantic, Eddie sees the moving snare of a crane and hops on it, figuring it will likewise be brought down to the ground. However right now, the laborers arrive at the finish of their day and leave the site, so Eddie winds up stuck on the crane watching the nightfall. One of the laborers sees Bink creep out of the building site, however the thought is so silly he pins it on his creative mind. The lawbreakers abandon the child and choose to get back. The FBI visits the Cotwells to advise them regarding every one of the spots where Bink has been seen as the day progressed. Gilbertini promptly draws an obvious conclusion and understands he's after the excursion of the book, so the last spot he'll visit must be the old fighter's home. The family and the police get there and viably observe him among the older, who are singing a tune for him. When the family has rejoined, they generally get back in the vehicle along with the FBI specialists, and when they pass through the throughway, Bink perceives the structure he had been kept at due to the clock outside. He begins pointing at it and referring to it as Boo Boo, which shows the grown-ups his book is there. The FBI pivots and in the wake of calling for fortifications, they encompass the structure and request the crooks to give up and return the book. 4 has no other decision except for to throw at them the book through the window before he and his mates set their hands on their heads, holding on to get captured. At the point when the family gets back, they follow the closure of the book, which comprises of taking care of the child. When his folks are concealed, Bing goes to his racks and picks his next top choice, Baby's trip to China.